Standing in my driveway, still dressed in my judicial robes from a morning court session, I watched the HOA president's face shift from seething anger to stunned silence. Just seconds earlier, she'd been jabbing her finger in my chest, yelling that I was nothing more than a wannabe lawyer with a Wi-Fi connection. But now, as her eyes landed on the gold federal badge hanging from my neck, the air around her seemed to change. Her jaw slackened, her body stiffened, and in that moment amid the early rustle of autumn leaves and the rising tension of our small suburban community, it became clear that she had just picked a fight with the wrong homeowner. Her name was Denise Trowbridge, and she had ruled the Oak Bend Crossing HOA with the kind of iron grip usually reserved for warlords and overzealous middle school principals. But I wasn't always the homeowner she tried to bully. Let me take you back to how all of this began. After serving 25 years on the federal bench, most recently presiding over complex fraud and embezzlement cases, I'd semi-retired to a quiet role, hearing selective civil cases and mentoring young attorneys. What I truly longed for, though, was a place that felt like home. Somewhere serene. Somewhere where no one knew my name. Oak Bend Crossing seemed perfect. Manicured lawns, friendly neighbors, and a sense of order without pretension. It wasn't ostentatious, just a nice neighborhood where the biggest debate at the HOA meeting should have been whether to allow fairy lights past Christmas. The neighbors were kind. Craig and Melissa next door brought over warm banana bread. Sam across the street invited me to his tailgate barbecue. No one asked what I used to do for a living, and I didn't offer. It was liberating, in a way, to just be Miles, the quiet guy who liked gardening and classical music. 3 weeks into my new life, I attended an HOA meeting out of curiosity. I figured it was a good way to stay informed, maybe even offer some insight if needed. What I walked into felt less like a meeting and more like a courtroom under dictatorship rule. At the head of the room sat Denise, mid-50s, rigid posture, a tight blonde bob, and the scowl of someone perpetually one coffee short of tolerable. Her tone was clipped, her demeanor smug. I noticed that every time a resident asked a question, she interrupted or redirected. The board has decided. That's not open for discussion. We've consulted experts. It was like watching a bad rehearsal of a town hall in a dystopian novel. After the meeting, Sam caught me by the mailbox. "She wasn't always like this," he said quietly, glancing over his shoulder. "Ever since Denise got elected, it's been fines and threats nonstop. You heard about Marty's flag? I hadn't. He got hit with a $2,000 fine for putting up little American flags around Memorial Day. Said it violated the decor aesthetic. That night, I reviewed the HOA bylaws. They were specific and, more importantly, protected by state statute that ensured patriotic displays couldn't be penalized. I drafted an appeal letter for Sam, something simple but precise, with citations that left little room for argument. 2 days later, Sam knocked on my door with a huge grin. "They dropped the fine. Whatever you wrote, it was magic." I just smiled. Let's just say I've dealt with legal language before. That was the start. A month later, all residents received a certified letter announcing an emergency assessment of $8,500 per household. The stated reason? Urgent infrastructure repairs to drainage systems and common spaces. The language was alarmist. Non-compliance will be treated as legal defiance. Action required. It didn't add up. Oak Bend was a newer development. There hadn't been a single stormwater backup or structural complaint since I'd moved in. At the emergency meeting, Denise shut down any questions about where the money was going or who was handling the repairs. When I asked to see the engineering report, she waved me off. It's highly technical. Only board members and approved consultants are authorized to review it. That night, I did some digging. Turns out, the contractor hired for the project, East Ridge Solutions, was incorporated 3 months prior. Its sole proprietor? Kevin Trowbridge, Denise's brother-in-law. I quietly passed this to Craig, who had once served on the previous board. His reaction? I'm not surprised. Ever since she took over, they stopped publishing detailed minutes. Closed meetings. Random violations. Then I checked public records and found more. Denise had a previous name, Denise Calhoun. Under that name, she'd been treasurer of another HOA in a neighboring county. That HOA dissolved after $310,000 mysteriously vanished from their reserve funds. This was no longer neighborhood politics. This was criminal. The very next week, I received 3 HOA violations, one for non-regulation foliage, another for trash bin visibility, and a third bizarrely for my garden hose being the wrong shade of green. It was clear I was being targeted, so I installed cameras. What I caught on video over the next week was astonishing. Board members were skulking around my yard at 5 a.m., measuring my lawn with rulers and peeking through windows with flashlights. Other neighbors, too, were being targeted. One woman received a citation for a wheelchair ramp deemed an unauthorized exterior modification. A family was fined daily for their basketball hoop installed 3 years ago. At the next HOA meeting, I confronted Denise when she tried to ban home-based businesses. According to Article 8, Section 4, I began, such changes require community vote. You don't need to lecture us on Google law, she snapped. I'm not, I said evenly. Just reading from the bylaws. Later that week, I caught Denise and Kevin on camera removing files from the HOA office at 11 p.m., shoving them into the back of her SUV. The time for quiet research was over. We formed a coalition to end homeowners at first, then 20. Each person took a task, reviewing financials, documenting violations, analyzing past projects. One neighbor, Rebecca, who worked at a credit union, found $175,000 withdrawn in cash over 2 months, all authorized by Denise alone. I filed formal complaints with the state housing authority and the county DA. Then, under the HOA bylaws, we submitted a petition signed by over 40 homeowners requesting a special hearing on Denise's conduct. Her response? Procedurally deficient. Rejected, which was perfect. Her denial allowed us to escalate the matter under state law. That morning, just hours before the mandated hearing, I had a federal court appearance. I donned my judicial robes, badge in pocket, and headed out the door. That's when Denise rang my bell. Not a polite press, but a hostile, unrelenting buzz. I opened the door. She had 2 board members in tow. So you're the ringleader, she spat, waving the petition. I nodded. You think you're smart? We'll be putting a lien on your property today. Foreclosure proceedings start next month. She didn't notice my robes or the badge. Then the light shifted and the gold eagle glinted. She froze. Wait, what are you? I'm Judge Miles Harlan, I said calmly. Federal court. 25 years specializing in fraud and real estate misconduct. She took a shaky step back. This morning you threatened me with a legal foreclosure. On camera. Denise was pale as chalk. One board member murmured, You threatened a federal judge? I didn't feel smug. I felt relief. For once, the weight of justice had moved faster than corruption. The hearing that day was a reckoning. Frank presented spreadsheets showing targeted enforcement. Tom revealed financial irregularities. I detailed state law violations, presented Denise's history under a different name, and read out signatures on withdrawal slips. Denise crumbled. I didn't mean harm, she whispered. The money was meant to be paid back, but it was too late. The board was removed. Denise was escorted out glaring but defeated. Weeks later, the DA filed charges for embezzlement, identity fraud, and conspiracy. Denise faced up to 15 years. Kevin, too. The new HOA board, led by Craig and Tom, reversed all improper fines. The fake infrastructure project was scrapped. Property values climbed 15% in 6 months. A new oak grove was planted in Mrs. Langley's backyard where Denise had ripped up trees for fake drainage work. 1 year later, we held a block party. Families laughed, kids played, and someone handed me a glass of sweet tea. Why didn't you just shut her down from day one? Sam asked. Because if I had, I said, it wouldn't have been a community standing up. It would have just been me. And this was never just about me. Sometimes justice wears a robe in the courtroom. Sometimes it wears one at home. And sometimes it doesn't need a robe at all.